Hello again, everyone. Today I'm going to be profiling the new Daniel Smith gouaches. These are a fairly new addition to the Daniel Smith line. I'm not as familiar with using gouache as I am with watercolor, but I did want to try these because I think that they can be used both ways. So basically, if you're using them more in a traditional gouache way, you're using them either straight out of the tube or very minimally diluted to create an opaque wash or, painting just in general on your page. But you can also water them down and use them as watercolor. So I got their basic set, which has the titanium white, the Hansa yellow medium, the pyrrole red, and the ultramarine blue. So it comes with these four. And then I added 3 supplemental colors. I added buff titanium, cascade green, and Indian red. So this might seem like kind of an odd collection to supplement with, but sometimes I just don't like the stark white of titanium white. So I like to have buff titanium, which is a little bit more of a toned down version of titanium white. Cascade green is a really interesting color in watercolor, so I'm very interested to see how it will perform in gouache. And then Indian red, I just like Indian red as a neutral, and of the neutrals that they had in the gouaches, this was the one that I decided to get. Okay, so I'm going to put these tubes off to the side. I have also already put these in pans, but they have not dried yet. They're drying pretty quickly. I only put these in there maybe an hour ago. But I'm not going to work from these yet. I do plan to let these fully dry and see, dog fur, to see if they still work well in the dried pans, because typically gouache does not work very well when it's dried. Oh, yes, it clearly needs a lot of drying time because even though they may have developed a little bit of a hard exterior, they're not completely dry. So in another video, assuming I have time, I will try those out from the dried form. I'm actually going to, I got some of that on my finger, so I'm going to put that on a piece of paper over here so that I can not waste any of that. And now I'm going to have a red finger just because I've been having a hard time finding things because I've moved my office again. I may have to move it back, but just circumstances are the way they are, and I'm in a different room again. But what I'm going to do is, it looks like I got some marks on here. So this paper that I am using, I'm just using a loose sheet, is by B Paper Company. It comes in a little pack of, how many is, I think it's 50, yeah, 50 sheets, and it's 6 by 9, and I just purchased this off of Amazon. They tend to sell out quite a bit, but like I said, they tend to sell out quite a bit, but when they do have them, it's a great bargain for those. Sorry, I'm just getting something else off camera here, trying to get some of that red off of my finger. All right, and as with most Daniel Smith products, these are very highly pigmented. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little blotch up here at the top, and that's what I'm going to use to do my swatches today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay it down thickly at the top, and then I'll try to water it down a little bit towards the bottom. Let's give it a little bit of space. And I think what I might do is mix that white with something else. Not sure I'm applying enough gouache, but we'll soon see whether that is enough, because I don't want to flood the page with it. And these seem very creamy out of the tube. And generally people use gouache out of the tube, but it is kind of nice to have it in travel form. Obviously, if they're in dried pans, you would have to be a little bit careful to make sure you're not over diluting it if you want it to be opaque. But it would be convenient, certainly, to travel with it in pans. Okay, and then lastly, Indian red. And I'm not sure how these are made. A lot of companies will put, maybe not chalk, but something that does make the paint opaque, or they'll add white. But this, like for example, this Indian red just says it's PR 101 with nothing else added. So I'm not sure. I think the pigments are all the same as their watercolors. I'm actually going to start from this side. So let's go ahead and do an opaque, and it actually is very, very smooth, very, very nice. It moves very well on the paper in this opaque form. So you can put this, and you'd use just sort of the bare minimum amount of water to get it to move. And you can apply this as thickly or as thinly as you like. So that's the opaque version there. And I'm going to water down the bottom of this swatch down here so that we can see what it looks like a little bit more watered down. Okay, there we go. So these others, I think, are not going to have as much space because, as always, I'm always putting the colors too tightly together. So with this, again, I just added a little bit of water to the brush, just enough to get the color to move. It's not moving that well right now, so I'm going to add some more water. But again, beautiful, really smooth. You're not having to fight to move it around the page at all. Just add a little bit of water and paint away. And that was a really small amount of gouache, and you can get a really large area. I mean, I probably could water this down even a little bit more and still get an opaque swatch. So I'm going to rinse off my brush and just kind of load it up with water again. And then we'll pull this down. My suspicion is that when we pull it down, we'll essentially get what we would get with the watercolor version, but I'm not sure. I'm actually going to put some water in this one in particular because it does tend to have a separating pigment quality. This is actually beautiful. I actually think this might perform a little bit better than the watercolor version. And because it's so concentrated, this might be a good alternative to using the straight watercolor of that color. All right, so here is the titanium buff. And again, the titanium buff is probably one that I would use more as a mixing color than on its own, but you know, you could use it for things like sand on a beach or something like that. It's a really nice light neutral that has a lot of uses. I use it a lot in my standard palette. I don't have a white in my standard palette, but I do have a watercolor, but I do have this buff titanium. Okay, so there it is in its opaque form. And then again, I'm rinsing that off, and then I'm going to pull it down to get the more diluted version. All right, now we're going to move over to the ultramarine blue, which, oh, very saturated, very beautiful. Oh, this is already giving me all the feels. I really love the look of this. So I didn't used to like ultramarine blue just by itself. I've actually grown to kind of like just the tone of it without any mixing. But I do tend to mix with it, and it's a beautiful mixing color, but I've definitely warmed up to just the regular tone of ultramarine blue. Okay, so that's the opaque version. I'm going to rinse off my brush, so it's just straight water that I'm adding here to the bottom. And lovely, lovely, lovely. Once I've done these swatches, I'm actually going to add some water to that as well because this should be granulating. Once I'm done with these swatches, I'm going to look at the tubes a little bit more and give you some more information. Oh, and this is beautiful too, Pyrrole Red. I do kind of wish that they had sort of a cool red instead of this, but I do think that you can work with this. And what I think I'll do is I'll mix this color with white, and we can see what kind of a pink we can get from that. Again, I'm just adding a little bit more water to brush it down. And it seems like you can actually add quite a bit of water to get it to flow without without interfering with its opaque quality. And I do wonder if they didn't use a magenta or something like that, because it's harder to make something like magenta opaque because it's naturally very transparent. All right, so let's pull that down. Really beautiful pure red. Now we have the Hansa Yellow Medium, which is in watercolor one of my favorite yellows. It's a very good sort of middle of the road between cool and warm, and it makes some lovely greens when mixed with blues, lovely oranges when mixed with reds. It's just a good overall color. Okay, so there it is. There it is, opaque. And then again, I'm just adding water here to the bottom. Okay, nice. So given that we can't really see the white on the paper, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to break this bit of white up into two little batches. I'm going to put the other one over here. And this one I'm going to mix with blue, and this one I'm going to mix with red. So let's get a little bit of blue over here. A little bit of blue. I don't want to go too much because I don't want it to overwhelm the white. Same with the red. Just a pretty good dollop there. Okay, so I am just going to mix the two of these. And you know, you can always tweak and add more white or more red. But this actually makes a pretty good pink. That I probably added a little too much red to get a really nice vibrant lighter pink, but I do think that it looks pretty nice, and you can, you know, you can play away and work at mixing and seeing what you can get with all these different colors. So basically when you mix the white with any of these colors, you're going to get a more pastel version of the color. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Let's see how much we can get that to come down. Yeah, it moves really, really nicely on the paper. Okay, so I'm rinsing that off, and then I'm going to do the pull down again like I did before. And again, to get a good pink, I probably would have added a little bit more white there, but it really did make a nice color there. Okay, and again, I'm pretty sure I added too much blue, but again, I mean, this is actually a pretty nice, like a cornflower blue when mixed with that white. Again, I'm going to add a little bit of water to pull that down. And if you get the ratio right, you can get really nice crisp edges as your lines. I think we still have a little bit of color up there that's not fully mixed. And again, I'm just gonna pull that down, and then I will add just water at the end again. So clean brush with nothing but water. All right. But as you can see, no matter what the color, the top area is opaque. And I have a feeling they chose their colors to be more conducive to being opaque, given the color selection that they have. And towards the bottom here, you can see what it looks like watered down. I don't think it looks much different than their watercolors, but it's nice to have the option to go more opaque, because basically you could color in whole surfaces. Essentially, gouache is sort of like the oil paint of the watercolor world. So you could use it somewhat, I mean, obviously it's going to dry faster, different properties, etc., but you can layer with with gouache in a way that you couldn't necessarily layer with watercolor. So you can have more of an impasto technique, which would be like texture on the paper. You can have that with it, or you can have a smooth wash. There's a lot of different things you can do, and I frankly have not played around a lot with gouache, so I would like to add it more to my art practice. You can also get a lot of graphic artists use a gouache just because you can get such a nice solid layer of color, and it's a little more controllable because of that, due to its opaqueness. All right, and I have to say, so I'm not really seeing much well, it's not completely dry yet, still wet. Not seeing too much going on with the granulation and the ultramarine. However, I think that this is a much better result for the Cascade Green in its diluted form than the regular watercolor tubes. I would probably replace my watercolor pans with this. So far, the pans seem to be drying pretty well. I have them up here drying. One of the main problems of drying them in a pan is for other brands is they tend to crack because there's not as much moisture content in gouache as there is in, say, watercolor. And watercolor can crack in its dry form as well. It just depends on a variety of factors. But from what I've heard, this particular gouache does not crack, or at least doesn't crack very much in the pan, but that remains to be seen. But I did want to swatch these for you, and these, Daniel Smith, I really like Daniel Smith. I know there's been various controversies about Daniel Smith over the years, but regardless, they still remain a good quality watercolor company. They also sell oil paints. I've never tried their oil paints. Maybe someday if I ever get into oil paints, I'll try them. Oil is just a lot of cleanup, like toxic cleanup, and it just takes forever to dry. I think it's more that than the toxic cleanup, because there's ways around that. Like you could use water-soluble oils. You could use just a very small amount of solvent to clean up, or you could just use a palette knife, in which case you would just be wiping your tool instead of putting it in some sort of liquid to clean it off. A variety of things you can do about the toxic side of oil paints, but they do just take forever to dry, and I'm just frankly not that patient. So that's the main reason why I haven't gotten into oils. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed the swatching of these brand new gouache colors from Daniel Smith. They're not super brand new by the time you see this, but they are a relatively new product. Well, that's all I had for you today. Feel free to subscribe to keep track of future videos on my channel. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. I hope to see you next time, but in the meantime, have a nice day. All right, bye.